Did we want to do, I guess we can see who's on the call here.
Yes.
Just thinking in terms of a roll call, but we can see everyone and everyone has their name there. There's no phone numbers where we don't know who it is. Sometimes it's funny to see people's names on these Zoom calls. Right now, I'm doing it from my computer at work, but at my laptop, my 10-year-old will use it for Zoom. And so sometimes I'll bring my laptop into work, or I'm doing something at home and I'll get on Zoom and her name will have changed to like something goofy like unicorn something, or all sorts of various names. So not on that same degree, but I see Nikki, I see your at the end of your name, Nikki, it says measure to improve. So must have been on your last call, must have been an interesting one.
You know what? I've been adding it, especially when there's multiple people on the call. But you can change your name. Now I don't know how to add a picture, but yeah. Some people do make jokes. They call themselves Superman, or just to get people's attention, or put something
That's
fun
right.
in there.
Yeah. Actually, I had a Rotary meeting via Zoom, and we were doing a raffle for 49ers football. And I'd gotten it donated from the 49ers, and we were doing a raffle as a fundraiser. So I took my phone and I had the video on my phone just pointed just the football. That was all that was on there. And then I was on my computer. And so it was a Dwight Clark commemorative football. So I put the name as Dwight's Football on there and had it on there. Well, it's a couple minutes after the hour. I see that we have quite a few people on, not everyone, but.
Can you see me?
If I go to the right screen, I can see you. Oh yes, Brett, I get to see your office again.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
I have my family of pit bulls on the wall behind me there. And
Yeah.
all kinds of office looking stuff. I could be like Patrick and put up a background. We'll see. I think all I have is Tupac Shakur for my background, so I won't bore you guys with that.
Oh, that makes me want to ask why that's the only background you have. Well, let's go ahead and get started, and I'll just start off by saying that I certainly bring this meeting to order with the heavy heart with the loss of Mayor Joe Gunter. Just amazing, someone like him that had over 50 years of public service. I was talking to one of his fellow council members earlier today, and we were both of us commenting that we both have certainly butted heads with Mayor Gunter over the years. But the one thing that can never be questioned is his heart and most importantly, his passion for public service. And I hope that as time goes on, whether it's us in our roles as on the advisory committee and the various other roles that we have, or just as citizens, to be thinking about Mayor Gunter and people like him who give so selflessly and so much of their time just out of passion. And I've always believed in that notion of leaving the world a better place. And I think someone like Mayor Gunter definitely embodies that, and was will continue to be a living testament of that. So with that being said, and the task that we have at hand, let's keep that in mind, and as we go forward. So we again, we have public comment on there, but I don't see any members of the public on our meeting today. I did want to start off with the minutes there. That's the first item on the agenda there. Did anyone have any discussion or comments related to the contents of the minutes? And if anything comes up throughout the meeting that might relate to the minutes, then we can certainly discuss those. Actually, let me just really quickly open it up to any advisory committee members. Is there any comments or questions or needs that you have before we get into the meat of the agenda here?
It's Caesar Lara, I guess, citizen from the city of Salinas. So on the minutes from January 30th, I wasn't present, but would it be appropriate to make a motion? And it probably shouldn't be me since I wasn't there, but just to move things along.
Yeah, let's yeah, that's right. We should do that. I go back and forth on meetings like this where they're not quite as formal as our board meetings that many of us are used to. But yeah, this is on here for approval. So might be a little bit easier, Caesar, I appreciate your comments. If a board member who was at that board meeting, if they could just say, I move to approve the minutes.
This is Grant Leonard. I'd make that motion.
Okay, and is there a second?
I'll second that motion.
Okay, thank you, Brett. And I'm just gonna do it like this. Does anyone object? Object now or forever hold your peace.
That's the best way to do it.
There we go. There. So seeing no objections, we've got the minutes passed. We've taken care of item number 1 there. Item number 2, which is the board meeting highlights and general manager comments. I'll turn it over to Patrick, please.
All right. Well, thank you, Rob. Welcome, everybody. Appreciate y'all taking time out of your busy schedules. It seems like this is our world now, Zoom meetings. I've been on them all day long, but actually seem like I'm actually getting more done these days with these Zoom meetings because they're pretty efficient. So in light of all your time today, I'm going to not spend too much time on the meeting highlights, just to hit a few high points of the highlights, and then take any questions you might have if there's any specific actions the board has taken that you might be interested in hearing a little more information on. But the first part of the year, really the board and staff are really focused on things primarily surrounding the budget. As you know, we have a 3-step process for our budget. We have budget, we call budget directions or general budget outline discussions that happen in January. In February, draft budgets are presented, though this year the board elected, because they were satisfied with the original proposed budget, not to have the second draft budget meeting, but to hold off until March to adopt the final budget. So in March, the board did adopt the final budget. Oddly enough, that budget adoption came right at the start of the COVID quarantines. And so there was, some general discussion around being prepared to adjust that budget to take some reactive measures in the event that the agency was significantly impacted. But to date, that hasn't, and I'll get to that in just a second, about where the agency stands relative to COVID impacts. So the first part of the year was really centered on budget, the continuing discussions that we've been having regarding moving forward with a relocation project to satisfy the needs of the city, and also talking about the actual city notice of withdrawal and providing regular updates to the board on that. Couple big highlights. One of the things we did do during the course of the last few months was identify that there was clearly a very strong need to continue to expand distribution of food to people in need. That need actually grew based on information we received from the food bank, but really just in general, I think we all knew there was a lot of people out of work or having their work deferred or delayed. And so the demand for supply of food through the food bank continued to grow. And at the board's direction, we used some one-time monies to go ahead and buy the food bank a second food distribution refrigerated truck. We had bought them one a year ago as part of our organics grant from the state, and felt that now was a good time to invest some of the agency's money back into that. One, because there was a community need, and two, because it actually continues to meet our long-term mandates of increasing recovery of food and redistribution into the community. So we really got two great public benefits out of that investment. Some of the other things that happened during the course of the last several months, obviously around, and we'll talk in great detail about this when we get to the following items on the project, the relocation project, as well as the update on our discussions with the city about the notice of intent to withdraw. But we continue to educate the board on some existing items, presentations on modern transfer station design, which you've all seen. There was a request to bring that back to the board, as well as keeping the board informed about new technologies and different opportunities for advancing waste recovery beyond the traditional methods that we have all been relying on for the last couple of decades in this industry. So one interesting thing that has gone on, and we've seen some very significant differences. There's some items in there relative to how's COVID impacted our industry. And it really is, there's some very stark differences depending on the community. And what we're finding is agricultural-based communities like ours that rely very heavily on the ag industry for employment, revenue, and tax base, that our industries are really not as deeply impacted. In fact, as of today, our revenues are actually only slightly below the same revenues from last year. So we had a dip during the early month and a half, the first part of the quarantine. We did see some dip in revenues, but most of that has come back, and we're back to relatively normal levels right now. So I say that, with a lot of great caution. We still have decided to make some interim decisions not to roll out a couple of programs and hire a couple of new employees that were approved in our budget this year, to wait and see whether this is a sustained recovery for us or whether this is just circumstantial and things will change. So we're going to hold off at least for a quarter in the new fiscal year, which starts tomorrow, and sort of track things and keep the board informed before we begin primarily our wood recovery sorting operation. Equipment's on site, haven't hired bodies, and won't be doing that. On the negative side, unfortunately, the communities that are very impacted by this are really communities that rely very heavily on tourism and hospitality. And of course, Monterey Regional being primarily serving the peninsula cities, which is a hospitality based economy, they're feeling a much more significant impact. And talking with my peers across the state, that's a very common theme. Those of us working in the Central Valley or in the Salinas Valley and other areas that are heavy ag are really seeing very minimal impacts on our revenues, whereas the communities, Sonoma, Napa, Monterey, and other places that are hospitality based are probably seeing the worst of the impacts because the hospitality generates a lot of waste, a lot of revenue, requires a lot of recycling. And as a result, the district has through a series of measures, either golden handshakes, enhanced retirement offers, or directly through layoffs, have unfortunately had to cut their workforce back by 20%, which is very substantial. The good news is that they will recover. I mean, the hospitality industry is fairly robust, but they'll probably have a rough year or two until that begins to come back. And in our case, again, we're remaining cautious and hoping that the revenue recovery we've seen very quickly sustains itself throughout the year. So that's really a quick overview of the highlights and sort of what we're seeing in our industry right now relative to the COVID impacts. Does anybody have any questions, comments, or want some additional information?
Don't be shy. I know there was a lot just thrown at all of us. So any questions on any of those items?
All right.
Okay, well, we'll move on then. Let's see, I think that covers all within item 2.
Yes.
So the next item, item number 3, is an update on the expansion of the organics program, and looks like we're going to hear from Mandy.
Yes, you are. Can everybody hear me okay? Yes, I
Yeah,
see
we
some
sure can.
nodding.
Yep.
Okay, very good.
Gotcha, Mandy.
Thanks, Brett. Good afternoon, everyone, and it's nice to see or hear or Zoom you all. I know this is a new and different format, but thank you all for still participating. So I'm going to be providing an update on our SB or Senate Bill 1383 planning for organics recovery programs, which is really focused on reducing the amount of food scraps and packaged food waste from entering the landfill. And then along with that, we're going to provide an update on our operation of our new composting facility to help meet these new mandates. So Vanna is operating the slides, or Rosie, sorry. I think she asked to be called Vanna. So thank you. So what is organic waste? So for this discussion, it really includes all kinds of the food waste. It includes pre and post-consumer food scraps. So what that means is, let's say you're chopping vegetables to make a soup and you don't use all the trimmings. That's the pre-consumer food waste. And then there's also post-consumer food waste, which is, if you think about if you went to a restaurant, you didn't finish all your food, then you'd scrape your plate, and that would be post-consumer food waste. So it targets all the different food waste, including fruits, vegetables, cheese, meats, bones. It also includes all our packaged produce and foods like salads, lettuce, broccoli. It also includes food soiled paper that could be mixed with the food waste. And this could be like paper napkins, paper plates, used pizza boxes, or compostable packaging. It also includes green waste or yard waste. So leaves, grass, branches, and also clean wood like pallets, lumber, things of that nature. So when we're talking about organic waste from our perspective and this legislation's perspective, it's a very big, broad category. So why the focus on the organic waste? The short answer really is that California still throws away a lot of organic materials, including food. And we also have a lot of people that are still going hungry every day in our state. So CalRecycle, which is a state agency that's overseeing the legislation, the focus is on organic waste reduction, which is part of the larger state climate strategy of reducing greenhouse gases emissions. So organic waste is the largest waste stream in California. Approximately 27 million tons is landfilled every year, and we throw away over 6 million tons of food waste each year. So putting that into context, according to our local food bank, which Patrick had mentioned, here in Monterey County, they serve 1 in 5 residents, 50% are children. So this equals just here in Monterey County about 45,000 kids that are experiencing food insecurity issues every day. So this is why the focus on organic waste, not only to get it out of the landfill, reduce greenhouse gas emissions, but also to feed hungry people. So locally, We recently completed a waste characterization study that was at the end of 2019, which feels like 3 years ago, but I think that was just a few months ago. And we looked at the various types of waste that are still entering the landfill at Johnson Canyon. And we looked at it by waste sector and also by jurisdiction. So organic waste makes up the largest percentage still being landfilled in the Salinas Valley. In the commercial sector, food waste makes up over 30%, of which 37% is packaged food. So this is why, which I believe we've talked about this before in the past, why the depackager that we had purchased and have been running is so important part of our organics program, because we have to get at that packaged material. This waste characterization study, the results of it have also been very helpful in our SB 1383 program planning, which I'll talk about here shortly. Next slide. So the key implementation dates for meeting the 1383 mandate. Technically, the mandate took effect January 1 of this year. So it's actually really good that we have started planning. January 1, 2020, there is required a 50% reduction in disposal of organic waste at the state level. This is not meant for individual jurisdictions. By 2022, regulations take effect and the state can begin enforcement. And then by 2024, the local governments are required to take enforcement action. And then at 2025, there's another percentage reduction of 75% of reduction of organic waste and a 20% edible food recovery for human consumption. So there's a lot of programs that need to be in place and programming that needs, planning that needs to take place in order for our agency as well as all of our member agencies to meet these key implementation dates and milestones. Next slide. So in January, our board awarded contracts to assist us with the planning effort. SCS Engineering is assisting with developing our program plan along with our member agencies to help meet all those requirements I was just mentioning. Diversion Strategies and Green Mountain Technologies were the other consultant that was hired to provide our compost marketing plan as well as our technical assistance now that the composting operation is complete. So the update is that last week we conducted all of our initial planning meetings with each of the cities as well as the county and all their individual garbage and recycling haulers and provided the draft reports for their review and input. Kind of highlighting what are the programs that they have existing and what would they need to implement in order to meet the 1383 requirements. So we hope to have a finalized plan in September, and then we'll present that to our board in late fall for hopefully implementation to meet those mandates. Next slide. So this is just a sample of our program planning. This is what we're working on with SCS engineers. You can see the June is highlighted. So we are right on target for our program planning and timeline. And this timeline also aligns with the implementation dates and milestones that I just showed you for the 1383. And it will hopefully ensure that programs are in place to meet those mandated requirements, because it's going to take a little while. Government doesn't like to move super fast. So we need at least 1.5 to 2 years to get everything up and running. But the good news is we're on schedule and we're moving forward. Next slide. So this is the new aerated static pile composting system that was completed at the end of May. And this is the view of the facilities actually looking down from the top. If you could envision yourself at the top of Johnson Canyon landfill, if you've ever been out there, this is looking down on it. The pad that you're seeing there, the big concrete area, is approximately 1 acre. It's got 60 rows of air pipes that are sunk into concrete and are connected to air blowers and controls. And this is where all the compost will be placed. Compost also needs a lot of water. So you can see in the, I think it's the lower right-hand corner of the picture, there are some green water tanks there. And these tanks will hold the water from our on-site stormwater pond as well as clean water and will help in the composting operation. The pad is designed to compost approximately 75,000 tons of material annually. And then to the left of this picture, which you can kind of start to see, but it's really out of view, is our existing chip and grind facility. which will be able to accept an additional 50,000 tons of material for wood chips and pre-compost feedstock. So this is where all the grinding happens, and then everything's moved over and put on the pad. So the total cost for the facility was approximately $2.5 million. The grant funding paid for about half, 1.4 million. And that includes the depackager and that food rescue truck for the food bank that Patrick had mentioned. So the depackager, I'm gonna point to my screen, but nobody's gonna be able to see what I'm looking at. The depackager is like in the far back distance. It's a little, it looks like it's a little house, and that's where the depackager is actually housed. Do we have any questions, or I can do questions at the end too, if nobody has any questions. Next slide.
Just a quick question on that. It's
Oh,
great.
sure.
So that's your maximum amount you can do. Is that what you're anticipating you'll reach the maximum, or do we have a sense?
Yeah, so based on the planning that SES has been doing for us, we are actually technically shy about 27,000 tons of material, and capacity is the big issue. However, our facility is limited by our air board permit. So based on the regulations of the air board, local air board, we are restricted to the 75,000 tons because of emissions. But we're hopeful that the additional 50,000 tons from the chip and grind, which is like, your wood chips and mulches, will also help to offset the additional need. But capacity, compost capacity is a big issue around the state in terms of we got to divert all this material, who's going to take it, who's going to be able to compost it and handle all of it when it was traditionally going into the landfill. It's a good question, Grant.
So is there a discussion with the Air Resource Board about upping the permit, or is that an option? Or
to my knowledge, that is not an option. This is also the first ASP system that they have permitted, so we're kind of a bit of the guinea pig. This is all new for the Air Board as well. Patrick,
Yeah.
Did you want to chime
Yeah,
in?
Grant, the 75,000 is based on projections of bulk organic compounds. And so the ASP system actually produces a lot less of what we call VOCs. But ultimately, there is a generation limit that you have to stay under. And so we don't have a lot of other VOC sources at the landfill other than the landfill itself, which is not too high. So ultimately, they look at the entire facility and all the operations. And it's a very detailed engineering calculation that basically 75 is as far as we can go, because the projected emissions would exceed the thresholds if we went above that. It doesn't make a lot of sense. There's a lot of other composters out there that are wanting to build bigger facilities, but someone on a property next door to us could also build a 75,000 ton a year facility. So it's by facility. So the rules don't sort of make a lot of sense from that perspective, is that, there is another composter nearby. It doesn't generate that kind of volumes we're projecting, but ultimately we're two separate facilities, and the calculations on air emissions are done by facility. So we can't have 150,000 ton a year compost facility, but there can be two 75,000 ton facilities side by side. So we've had discussions with the Air District. I think they treated us fairly within the confines of their regulations, but ultimately they are working on some permanent district-wide regulations relative to compost facilities. So I can only tell you is based on us being the guinea pig and the first one out of the gate on this one, and using a system that produces less emissions than the old traditional systems. Unless they change their methodology, all facilities in their air district will probably be limited to somewhere in the 70 to 80,000 tons per year, based on the total emissions from that facility. So if it's the landfill, you've got some handicap to start with. If you're just a compost facility, you might have a little more capacity, but it's not going to be significant.
Greg, I'm sorry, Patrick, you mentioned that they were, the district was using, or the district's going to write their own? They're working on it. Who are they using now? The state?
Well, they don't have any regulations specific to composting. So yes, they're bound by the state laws, and
Okay.
they're really looking at pollutant loading, total pollutant loading per year as sort of the guideline. And Volt Organics are the predominant emission that comes off of a composting operation. So yeah, they are relying on some very limited information from the state and a few studies that have been done that looked at emission production, like what different types of compost technologies and how many pounds of Volt Organic compounds do they produce per ton of feedstock. Yeah, it's a very complex air engineering calculation. Don't ask me to explain it because I barely understand it, but I do understand what the output is designed to do. And so, yeah, they will be writing their own, and some air districts have written their own that are far more onerous than the state guidelines, which are, again, sort of limited. I know the Bay Area Air Quality Management District is in a huge fight with the solid waste industry in general around the rules they're trying to promulgate that just basically shut the business down. It makes it not cost effective because they're so restrictive. So I don't know if our air district will take that same tact. I think they'll use what they did for us, and that'll probably be, I'm hopeful that'll just be the baseline for how they write the regulations, because it was relatively fair. It just doesn't take into account that we still need a lot of processing capacity, as Mandy said. If we don't do it, then there'll have to be other composters that'll come online and fill in those gaps.
Okay. We'll keep going. If there's more questions, we can talk about it at the end. So the other update here is that as of June 8th, Vision Recycling, our contracted organics processor, began composting. So we're making compost. So there you can see here in the picture, there's material on the pad and we have the air turned on. So this picture is actually from the opposite perspective on the pad from the previous slide that we just saw. So as a frame of reference, I was standing at the top of the giant hill behind the compost there. That's where the picture was from the previous slide. This is the opposite view of that, just as perspective. So the air is pumped into the material, and it's using those subgrade air pipes that I had mentioned with the large blue blowers, which are connected to the air pipes. You can see them behind the block wall there. The material will remain on this air pad for about 21 to 28 days, or until it meets the process to further reduce pathogens, or also known as PFRP. And that's where you must reach 131 degrees for 3 days. So once it comes off the air pad, the material is then cured for another 30 to 60 days, and that helps to stabilize the compost. So it just depends on who the compost is going to and how long it cures. Depends on who's buying it. Next slide. So we have also demoed and purchased a mixer as well as a tractor for the composting operation, which is pictured here. The mixer is actually used for mixing cattle feed or grain, but it has the same effect of mixing the ground green waste with the slurry that's coming from the depackager to create a more homogeneous mixture for the composting. So I equate it to being similar to making a cake batter. If we have any bakers among us, I am not a baker, but when you're making a cake batter, you don't want lumps or those dry spots. You want all the ingredients thoroughly mixed together. So that's the idea with the mixer. The mixer holds about 30,000 pounds or 15 tons of material at a time, and also has onboard scales so we can track weights, which is super helpful. Now the tractor is required to run the mixer, and once fully mixed, the tractor then is used to transport the mixer to the compost pad to deliver the material. The total cost for this, for both units, was about $160,000. It's pre-owned equipment, and we were able to use our existing grant funding, which got extended for an additional year to help offset this additional cost that we had not planned for. So this was a really great thing, and glad that this is working out for us. Next slide. This is just a view from inside the mixer. So these are the two dual rotating augers that help mix the material once everything's loaded in. So when it's operating, both of those mixers augers are spinning, and that's what creates the mixing. Next slide. So Patrick already stole my thunder on this one because he's already mentioned. If you remember, we had purchased a refrigerated food truck back in December of 2018, and that was with the grant funding to enhance the food bank's food rescue programs. The food bank has already rescued over 2,600 tons or 5.2 million pounds of edible food using that one truck. So with the 1383 requirements, it has a significant food recovery component to it. So when we've asked the food bank in the past, what could we do to help recover or and enhance your recovery efforts? And it's always been additional trucks would be super helpful. So in light of COVID-19 and the immediate increased demand on the food bank services, as Patrick mentioned, our board approved the purchase of a second truck, which happened in May. And this time the truck was fully funded by the agency. So we're hopeful that this truck will start collecting just as much as the other truck that's collecting, which is really great. So, and they were very appreciative of the assistance with the additional vehicle. And I think that's it. Yep. So if you have any questions.
I think you're still muted, Brad.
I have a question for you, Mandy. How much water
Yes.
does the composting process use?
Oh, that is a really good question. A lot.
Okay.
Is that specific?
No, just because of the sort of, desert climate that we have here, I was just wondering like what the battling resources are. There's MBARD, then there's the requirement to compost, and then if compost uses up tons of water, then you have to deal with that as well. And I was just wondering what the balance is.
Yeah, so part of the front part of the ASP system is that we would be able to use our stormwater pond water, right? That's collected on site, so that it's a reuse essentially of water. That pond, I believe, Patrick, correct me if I'm wrong, holds 1 million gallons.
Yeah, just over 1 million gallons.
Okay. So that water is connected to some of those green tanks that you saw in the picture. Obviously not 1 million gallons, that those tanks don't hold that, but that's the idea, is that it's pumped in. However, once in the process of composting, you reach that PFRP where you've met the 131 degrees for 3 days, which means you have pathogen reduction. You can no longer use the stormwater pond water, and now you have to use clean water. So that's why we have a couple different tanks out there. The amount of water that we're using, I don't know, because I don't know, but Patrick may have a better guess, because we've never composted before. So this is kind of new, at least for me.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
Where's the water coming from? Do you don't know?
yeah, we have on-site wells, and we're also working with a couple of dischargers that are interested in bringing us clean treated water as well. And we have access to water through the city of Gonzales. So we have several different sources available to us. But obviously, as Mandy said, our first priority is to try to use up as much of the on-site water as we can. But composting is water intensive. And I think if I recall, I believe it was somewhere between 2 and 3 million gallons a year at full capacity. So once it's running at 75,000 tons a year, it's about a 2 to 3 million gallon a year need.
But of course, the other trade-off,
Oh,
or the other,
Brent, you're still on, sorry, Brent, you're still on, you're muted.
There we go. Sorry, my understanding would be then that probably 2/3 of the water that's used does not come from on-site.
Correct.
Yes.
Okay.
and of course, the trade-off or the benefit is then the diversion of that stuff that would otherwise be taking up space in the landfill too. So it's a good question. I hadn't thought about asking that before, but it's also complex when we look at the overall net benefit of it.
So let me put this into perspective for you guys as a water guy. 2 to 3 million gallons a year. It's not that bad.
I forgot we had a water guy.
Just so
Oh,
you know,
thanks, Mark. I thought you were just gonna say like, this is terrible.
Yeah,
it's in the big picture in this valley. That's nothing.
It's
That
not.
is absolutely a drop in the bucket. So don't sweat the water.
Yeah, and another part of this that is really unknown to us right now, and that is agricultural culls. So one of the things that starts actually effective tomorrow is we have a very deeply discounted rate for the ag processors who bring us clean, uncontaminated culls, which is the byproduct of packaging. You know, the outside artichoke leaves, the cut stems off of the bottom of broccoli, the outer leaves of lettuce, because those things don't need to go through the depackager. They don't need to go through the grinder for chip and grind. They can be added directly to the compost. They all contain a lot of water. So, you know, we're hoping the ag industry will be interested in bringing those to us as at least one of the alternative outlets for them because of the price point that we've set for those materials. And because it benefits us too. That's embedded water that goes into the compost mix at the beginning. And that also will help offset some of the water demand for the compost production.
The slurry too, coming out of the depackager is surprisingly much more liquidy than I had imagined. So there's actually a ton of water that's coming out of the depackager as well.
Nikki, were you going to ask a question?
Yeah, sorry, Nikki.
Oh, no problem. This is all really good conversation. I was wondering, have you guys tested the compost, and have any growers kind of weighed in on the value of this compost?
So we just started, and so no, we not yet, because we don't even have a batch ready to go. So this is the very beginning. But that's actually a good point, because that's something that I've been attending. The ag industry has the leafy grain marketing agreement, and I've been attending their soil subcommittee meetings.
Oh, good.
Yeah,
Good,
so
good.
I've been talking with Ken Steen and Colby, and that would be the idea, is that we would like to get one of the growers involved and, you know, start looking at, would they be willing to take some of the finished compost once it's ready, but we're still like a couple months out, and do some testing on that, because ASP is a different type of composting method. Everyone in this valley is very used to the traditional windrow composting.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a good point.
I had one more. Darn it, I lost it. Oh, Patrick, you mentioned a price. What is this what is this reduced price point that you're looking at?
$14 a ton.
Oh, okay. All right.
We were trying to make it attractive.
So
Right.
if they're relying on Central Valley dairy farms and others, you know, we think that's that would be a very attractive price for them to keep it local and not have to pay all that extra trucking and deal with the clean transfer.
And Mandy, just one last question. I know that you're in front of the LGMA, and I know I'm representing GSA. Have you been in front of, I don't know if we have a replacement for the Farm Bureau, but GSA and Farm Bureau to really get this information out to the grower community?
We did a presentation to the Farm Bureau right before COVID happened.
Okay.
And then I did want to get in front of GSA. And if you could help with that, that would be fantastic. And that was also pre our facility being open. So now that it's open and, you know, we're actively composting,
Great.
we would love to make a connection with a farmer that would be willing to look at, you know, maybe doing a pilot with some of the compost and see how it works on their farm, and to kind of give it some, you know, some credence to that it's good usable material.
But the only thing is, are you guys doing pathogen testing and testing?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
great. So I
Yes,
think
there's-
having that list of tests when we get in front of
Yes.
the grower community, that's awesome. Okay.
Yes. So it would be STA. It's a standard testing assurance, which is if we're members of the U.S. Composting Council, that's their testing. It tests for a variety of pathogens, including fecal, coliform. There's a variety of pathogens that it tests for, but it has to meet the STA standards in order for it to be sold.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Great presentation. I'm super
Thanks.
excited.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
John Bailey, I've got a quick question.
Yes, John.
Sorry, I'm just the logo here.
I know, I saw that.
So I'm here with my cat. I figure I'll keep my cat off the Zoom call. So,
Oh, we love to see cats on Zoom calls. Come on. I'm waiting for my kid to Zoom bomb in. He hasn't come in yet, so.
so I'm on the board. One of the other hats I wear for Community Alliance for Family Farmers, and something that farmers are real excited about is they can, under the new rules, keep 25,000 cubic feet of compost on their farms, which wasn't something that was allowed. The law recently changed. So how far or what distance could a farmer come and take this material, or do you mind where it goes? Because CAF is statewide, so it wouldn't just be local Valley farmers. But I could see them wanting 25,000 square feet of compost from this facility.
Well, Vision Recycling is our organics processor, and they're in charge of marketing, but they will sell to anyone that's interested in buying the compost.
That's what I figured. So it's
Yeah,
Vision.
it's not limited to Monterey County. Anyone could come in and purchase. It's just a matter of, does it make sense for transportation?
Great. Well, I definitely could get word out to some small farmers if you're looking to like 40 to 400 acre farmers that might
Great.
want to pile on their farm. And
That would be fantastic. Please have them contact me, and then I can hook them up with Vision as well.
Yeah, great. Thanks.
Thank you, John.
So Mandy, do we have a sense yet what the market might be for this, or we're just kind of waiting to see once this first batch gets out there?
Well, Vision has, they have a huge market in the landscaping industry, which is more of like, chips and wood chips and mulches and things of that nature. But we do sell a pre-compost feedstock already to a local composter that's in the area. And then a lot of the farmers and growers that are interested in this type of compost, because it's made with food waste, are for orchards or vineyards or stone fruits or nuts or things of that nature, because it's not a row crop. So that's where, where Nikki was saying and John was saying that if we could do some pilots with using this material on potential row crops and, nothing bad comes from it, that we do have a little bit of a stereotype in the ag industry that we do need to change or work on changing that. But the good news is that it's the whole state of California that's going to be producing compost that's made with food waste. The other part of it too is that, just like a chef, you can do different recipes for composting. So some of the material doesn't always come in mixed already with the food waste. So there could be just clean green waste that's still made into a compost product. It just depends on the market and what the customer is wanting or needing, that they could also blend accordingly. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Okay, if we don't have any other questions, then I will turn it back over to Rob.
Yeah, and let's get into the next agenda item because this is the one that we're probably going to end up spending the most time on. And it's the update on the Sun Street Transfer Station relocation project, and a lot of moving parts to this one, right, Patrick?
Oh yeah, a lot of moving parts, but I'll try to be as brief as I can with this, not get too far in the weeds. But I just want to sort of the preamble to this is going to be one of the significant work areas for the committee, is to help us sort of work through, provide review and input into a whole variety of things associated with this project. So Vanna, could you put the slide back up to the first slide, not the intro, but there we go. Thank you. So just an update for those of you that don't remember from the last time we met. One of the things that has come about in the last several months is a conceptual plan that we have proposed to both the City of Salinas and Republic Services, as well as the county. And at this point, we seem to have consensus amongst all of the stakeholders, which again would be our agency, Republic Services, who is the garbage collector for the City of Salinas and the owner of Madison Lane Transfer Station, and the city itself, and the county. And so we've received a fairly strong, amount of support, unfortunately, from Mayor Gunter and the city manager, have both provided a lot of sort of supportive comments on going this direction. So with that, we're sort of at the front end of this project, looking at concept, layouts of the facility. The one piece that has not been resolved quite yet is Republic Services interest. Unfortunately, and this is a very strange statement, government moves like a rocket ship compared to a large corporate interest like Republic, who is the second largest garbage company in the world. And while the local folks seem very interested in this, they have to run all these conceptual ideas and proposals up a very tall corporate ladder, and then have it get digested and come back down with instructions and positions and those kind of things. So we haven't gotten as far along with Republic as we'd hoped, but in light of trying to move the project forward and keep it on track, Rob and I have been regularly meeting with the city manager and Mayor Gunter over the last couple of months on Fridays. So those, and I'll kind of talk on that, and Rob will as well on the last item, sort of the discussions around what is it going to take to get rid of this notice of withdrawal, to get us both back on a collaborative pathway. So to date, we've got several things, again, working with Republic on they've seen our proposal. We've provided them with some timeframes. We're waiting to hear the level of interest and what their positions may be. We're ready to begin to develop a conceptual plan. We have those from before. Those of you that were on the task force in the past have seen those drawings, how that facility would be reworked to meet both our needs and Republic's needs. And so we'll be working on updating those plans with Republic. And then, of course, some of you who have heard this project before know that one of the challenges with the Madison Lane Transfer Station, well, two challenges. One, it's really old and very rundown, so it needs investment. Whether that comes from Republic, from our agency, likely a combination, needs some big investment. But the bigger challenge is there is only one way in and out of that facility, and actually all the industrial businesses that occupy Madison Lane and South Baranda. And it's through a residential neighborhood. Laurel turns into Cali de Adobe. after it crosses Davis Street, and it goes into a residential area. And that's the only way in and out. And one of the things that has been agreed with the community out there over the years, as the county had worked on prior community plans, was that they would be okay with expanding that industrial commercial area, increasing activity, if the county and or city would build what we call the Rossi Road extension. That's taking Rossi Road where it dead ends into Davis and continuing it across the undeveloped meadow and farmland and connecting to either directly to Madison Lane or to Veranda Road, so that all the commercial traffic has an alternative way of getting, especially the heavy truck traffic that we can control, like the garbage trucks, would have an alternative way of getting in and out of that area without driving through the residential neighborhood. So that's a major part of this project. Next slide, please. So here's an aerial view of the Madison Lane transfer station. And it's composed of 3 properties or 3 parcels. Our proposal to Republic Services has been that we would like to acquire parcel number 007, the James Bond parcel. And the reason that makes so much sense for us, and I think for Republic too, they're not necessarily interested in running public services. They bought this transfer station to provide a base for moving their own franchise materials from point A to point B, recycling to the district, garbage and organics down to our facility, and any other materials that they're handling to an appropriate processor and destination. Most of that work occurs in parcel 5. In parcel 19 would be their corp yard. Their corp yard is adjacent to our Sun Street transfer station, and they're receiving the same pressure as we have been receiving to relocate so the city can build their LSL marketplace development over the next decade or so. So in light of that, they're being, the other reason for them to purchase this obviously is to have a corporation yard, and they have everything they need. The buildings in the center on parcel 5, the lower part, those are all shops designed for heavy truck maintenance and repair. They have space for storing containers. They really have everything they need there for a corporation yard. And then the upper main portion of the transfer station, there's a large square building that's underneath the 005 box. That would eventually become the tipping area for the franchise trucks. So the trucks would come in near the shop instead of coming in through the main entrance, which is over on parcel 7. That would be our area. That would be primarily for the public services, household hazardous waste, recycling center, buyback center. We'd like, a place we can build permanent offices. Right now we're in leased offices. We'd like to use that parcel for offices as well. And then the portion of the main transfer building that's in parcel 7 is actually where a lot of the public tipping would occur. That would actually be the public tipping area. So we don't have the exact layout here. That'll be something we'll be bringing back to this committee once we get a little feedback from Republic as to talk about services layout and what you all think would work best for the public in terms of how this facility serves the greater Salinas area community. So that's, I'll stop there just for a second. If anybody has any questions, I think the photo tells a lot. But that photo would have the gatehouses, the scales, it already does actually. The building in the lower leg of that parcel is actually used to be a household hazardous waste building back when we operated it under contract back in the 90s and early 2000s. Then all that open space underneath the 007 box, that's primarily just open asphalt that would get converted into either recycling centers, offices, parking, a number of possible things that would happen. But this would be adequate, more than adequate in size for our needs. and we would continue with all the great services we're doing to the community. And then we'd have some kind of arrangement with Republic on transportation, who does, you know, who transfers garbage, who loads garbage inside that building. Maybe a combination operation, or maybe something that they contract out with us, or vice versa. Next slide, please. So I won't go through all these in great detail, other than just to say this is a preliminary summary of all the actions. So obviously there's a lot of things we have to do with Republic Services. They are our partner, would be our partner in this business endeavor. You know, things like appraisals and building acquisitions, and who's going to fund what and what needs to be fixed, and CEQA has to start. And then operating agreements. There's a whole bunch of things that would have to be worked out between the authority and Republic Services. CEQA has to be conducted. Those of you that were on the original advisory committee know that, and you reviewed and commented on the scope of work for our purchase of Madison Lane. And I won't go back and spend time on the old story, other than to say a lot of the work to conduct CEQA, the project description and things, was done back in 2018 when we were intending to buy the property. So we actually already got a head start on starting CEQA. But what we need first is to have all 4 stakeholders at the table and 100% committed before we spend money. That's really what we're recommending to the board, is make sure this time that we have everybody on board. And that's sort of what Rob and I are working on right now, to get all the parties to be fully committed to this. So CEQA, there's a bunch of things that'll have to happen, but again, already got a contract, already got a contractor, have a huge head start, and are ready to start that process as soon as we get all the stakeholder commitments, and the board is ready to approve those contracts again. The Rossi extension, again, we know this is going to be an issue for the community. We have met with the county Public Works and Resource Management Agency staff, and they've agreed to work with us on the Rossi extension, all the components. How's that going to be funded? That roadway needs CEQA. We've recommended that roadway be included in our EIR as part of the project, and not added at the end of CEQA as a mitigation measure, because that's what's going to happen. It's what happened last time. So we know it's going to be a mitigation measure, so let's just accept it, put it in the project, go ahead and do the environmental study work that's associated with the road construction itself, and we got a big head start. And so we've got a tentative agreement with the county folks that they think that's a good approach, and they're okay with us including that. They'll have a lot of input in CEQA and the project description, because this is their road. They're going to have to build it. And then, of course, we have to talk about funding. Who's going to fund it? The original proposal that came from the city of Salinas a few years ago was a 4-way funding arrangement that they had done some preliminary work on, where the authority, the county, and the city and the business district each pay 1/4 of the cost of that road, since everybody's a beneficiary. City benefits because this is part of their long-range general plan bypass system. This is the first leg of it. The county benefits because they've got a lot of other people at the table helping to fund this, so it's not all county burden, because it is county property or jurisdiction right now. Businesses benefit because they now can bypass the log jam that happens at Davis and Laurel. And of course, the authority benefits because, well, we get to relocate and we get to solve this problem finally. So we've identified that as a critical part of this. And so we've got everybody, I think, at least in agreement that this is a component of the project that has to be dealt with, and we're going to deal with it up front so that it stays on a timely track. Next slide, please. So this is just I apologize for the quality of the scan. I tried it 10 times and I couldn't get it to scan well, But this came out of the original county plan when we first looked at this project back in the early 2000s, when right after the authority was formed. This is basically the rendition of the pathway for what the county referred to as phase 1 or phase A of the Rossi Road extension. And you'll notice it actually goes across this meadow and makes a right turn and actually connects directly onto Madison Lane right in front of the transfer station. That's phase A, and it's a 2-lane road only. So this is sort of like, let's get the first part done, keep the costs down, and build basically a 2-lane road. Phase B or phase 2 on this would be something that would be triggered by development of this large meadow that exists out near Madison Lane. And that road, the east-west version of that first segment of the road would, instead of making a right turn, would go continue to go straight and connect to Baranda Road. That is actually identified as the first leg of the city's, I think they call it the east-west bypass. It's in their general plan. And so, the second phase would be triggered by development. It would be expanded to 2 lanes, or 4 lanes, become an arterial, eventually a bypass with development and curbs, gutters, those other things going along with it. But this is the piece we're talking about here, which is just simply a 2-lane road. Next slide, please. So stakeholder roles, again, we've got really 5 stakeholders in this process. We've got the authority. This is obviously with a CEQA lead agent, co-funder. We're one of the cash cows at the table because this is our benefit, and we would be financing the road, part of the road construction, as well as improvements at Madison Lane. Republic Services, critical component. I can only say how important it is. We have our first formal meeting with them July 10th. I wish it had been sooner, but at this point they've been waiting for corporate direction, and it sounds as though they've gotten it and are now ready to sit down and begin to talk about the framework here. City of Salinas, clearly their role is the facilitator of this project. They want us to relocate out of the marketplace, and they need to be at the table as a critical stakeholder with a commitment to facilitate what they have to facilitate, like getting their hauler to collaborate and being at the table to help facilitate whatever kind of negotiations we have to undergo with Republic Services. And of course, the County of Monterey, this is their jurisdiction. They'll have some permitting oversight for this, because even though it's in the city's sphere of influence, the county still has jurisdiction. And then, of course, the South Baranda community and the businesses. The community is going to want to see this to reduce impacts with an expanded operation there and other businesses that are out there now in traffic. And the businesses are going to want to see this to provide them an alternative ingress and egress away from the existing traffic impact area. Next slide, please. So these are sort of the final asks. We've already achieved a few of these. We've got staff from the Resource Management Agency and Public Works at the county now talking with us and committed to help us out to move the Rossi Road extension part forward. As soon as we hear back from Republic, we'll begin the discussions around funding and preparation of an MOU for that project to make sure we're all again committed to the financing side and development of that roadway. We've already gotten general agreement that we will be looking at that road extension as part of our CEQA process and not having separate compartmentalized CEQA processes. And of course, the city, at least initially, and I think they've confirmed through action, at least, that they're interested in co-funding a portion of that project. we are leaning on Salinas to help, press forward with the partnership between us and Republic Services. So we are leaning on the city to help facilitate that. And as part of that, we're asking that the city assign staff, committed staff, that will work with us on this project. I mean, we are the lead and we're going to do most of the grunt work here, but the city needs to be at the table all through this process so that there's no misdirections later on, because we went one way and they want us to go a different way. So we're asking that they commit staff to this as well. And we've asked the city to, again, come back to us and let us know who are all the people that are interested in the marketplace. We want to sell Sun Street. Use that revenue from the sale of Sun Street to acquire, a portion of the Madison Lane facility, so that we can use the cash we have on hand for improvements and not for real estate acquisition if possible. So we are looking for, again, the city to share with us everybody and anybody they've talked to or currently talking to that may be interested parties in that LSL Marketplace project, because those are going to be the people that are going to want to buy the property. We don't want to talk to open market folks because they're going to find out that there's a development project coming in the next some number of years, and we just want to be talking with the people that are going to be the real long-term landowners out there when that project comes forward. And then finally, we've asked the city, we need to understand your conditions. We need to get the notice of intent to withdraw taken back, and get back on a different framework for getting this done. So next slide. So this is the last slide on my end, and this will segue into Rob's perspective on where we've been with the notice of intent to withdraw in our discussions. Just very quickly, the authority has been, we started out as a poor agency. We were handed 4 very expensive landfills with a lot of liabilities and not a lot of cash. And so in the early year at formation, the authority had to take out a lot of debt. We had a very, I would say not a very stellar bond rating because we had no credit. A brand new agency in 1997, we had a BBB rating. And so over the course of the next couple of decades, though, we really began to focus on, more conservative government financing, living within our means, saving money for rainy days, buying more things with cash than credit, and limiting our debt. And because of that, we have had a natural progression on our bond rating that today I would say we're very, very proud of. A AA- is, you can get better, but for government agencies, that's a very, very high rating. And we got that naturally, just through the board's conservative practices and managing what we do in a way that is long-term sustainable financially. And so one of our concerns right now, and we've shared this with the city, is we really need to get this notice of intent resolved, because if that, we're due for another bond rating. Typically there are 3 to 4 year cycles. Last one we had where we got upgraded was 2017. We could be due for another one this year or next year. And having that notice of intent would be viewed as a very negative mark and could, really damage the hard work the board has done over the last several years to really get this agency out of the hole we were born in and on a very positive financial track. So that's a good segue into the next item, but I'll stop here. And if anybody has any questions specifically about the project, I'll be happy to answer them, because this is where we're going to be asking a lot of input for you, looking at these various agreements as we begin to develop them, and looking at the facilities themselves, and giving us feedback on the public service side of what we're trying to do.
Patrick, I was looking for Rossi Road on the map and I don't see it. Does it exist currently?
Yes, it's in the city of Salinas.
No, I know. I'm looking at the facility from Google Maps and I don't see Rossi Road marked.
It dead ends into Davis. So
We're
if you look at
directly east.
It says Larkin Street, is it?
Nope, now go south. Go south on Veranda.
We could also do a screen share to see it too.
Is that like south of where the elementary school is?
Yes, south of that.
Yeah, it's funny, it's not marked on Google Maps. I understand the drawing now, that's fine.
Okay.
So Patrick, more of a statement than a question. Regarding that Rossi Street extension, I was at a public hearing that I'm gonna say was about a decade ago, about 10 years ago, probably more. There was a development that was supposed to happen in that field. That
Yes.
obviously never happened. And when I went to that public hearing, there's a lot of the community that didn't want it to happen at that time. And I'm not saying how important or not important or whatever, it's not my opinion. But one thing that stuck with me is there's a wetland in there that they're
Yes.
trying to protect with the birds and stuff.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure everybody's aware of that because there was a big fight.
Yeah, no, we're
Yeah,
actually
and-
very aware. I've had conversations with a few of the folks out there over the years. And there are a few challenges. There is a drainage area. I don't know if I would call it a wetland today because it's being farmed or it's been farmed recently. But there is a drainage area that the county identified. But CEQA would have to be a formal environmental review would have to be done with all the biotic studies to determine how that drainage or that wetland area is crossed. So if it's simply culverts, large old culverts that allow creatures to move through one end to the other, that's the easiest and best of worlds. But it could also be that it has to be bridged. That's going to raise the price of the project.
And let me jump in because this is one of the reasons why I said that I started this topic with the comment that there's a lot of moving parts to this. And yes, there's a host of issues regarding just the Rossi Road extension and complexities. There's complexities to leaving the Sun Street transfer station and selling that. There's complexities surrounding the purchase and moving into Madison Lane. So a lot of this starts with the strong support from the city of Salinas, because they're the ones that are going to help pave the way for discussions with Republic, for forwarding potential buyers to us on Sun Street, supporting the Rossi Road extension along with the county. So that's why I started off with a lot of moving parts to this. And quite frankly, that's part of the reason why this group was formed, is because nearly all of you would be strongly impacted by any such changes that were made here. And for the most part, then as a result, you guys would benefit, or the groups that you represent would benefit. And there may come a time where we need to have some organized support on this. I get that the NIMBYs will come out when they hear about the Rossi Road extension and when they hear about going into Madison Lane, but we have to collectively look at what's good for the whole on this. So, any other questions on this item? I imagine there are some. So anything else?
It's Grant Leonard. I have two questions. One is, when would the Veranda community start getting engaged? Would that just be through CEQA or any outreach before then?
Our plan right now is to deal with them directly right at the beginning of CEQA, probably even before scoping. I know John Phillips has committed to working with them directly since it's his district, and to facilitate those meetings. So I think our plan at this point is to actually have independent meetings with them, not just scoping meetings, but to work directly with the community as we start to roll this out. Of course, they'll be able to participate in CEQA scoping meetings as well, but I think we've got in our tentative schedule a full year of working with them all through the CEQA process, and not just at scoping and then comments at the draft, but really getting their input early on, finding out what kind of mitigation issues and measures they'd like to see. We've heard some of them from a few of the residents out there. Things like, better walls and sound protection. We sort of know where the weak points are on the existing structures and how they're designed. So yeah, we definitely have identified working with them as an independent task that would be done concurrently with CEQA.
Excellent. And then I guess maybe we'll get to this in the next item, but Salinas had issued their letter of demands related to withdrawal or not withdrawal. And I thought they had listed no new service station in the proximity of Salinas. So I guess I'm just a little surprised that they might now be supporting Madison Lane.
Well, there's always been lukewarm support for Madison Lane because it's existing and it's been here for over 30 years, almost 40 years. It's been there. So they've always, their current administration's statements have always been, outside of the city limits, this is outside the city limits technically, even though it's in their sphere of influence. But because it's an existing facility, I think, they've indicated that they're willing to support it. So, and it's not the first time our agency has looked at it. And it's not that we don't support it. There's just always been hurdles. And, what we've identified is we need these 4 or 5 stakeholders at the table day one so that we don't run into those hurdles later. They need to be partners in the process, and that includes the community itself and the businesses, as well as the other 4 entities.
Yeah, and let's use that as a segue to talk about the next item, and we can kind of go back and forth, although I do need to drop off in about 5 minutes. I have another board meeting at 5:30. But so there's a few issues surrounding that notice of intent to withdraw and withdrawing that. And one of the topics that Patrick and I had in our meetings with the city of Salinas, as Patrick has referenced those meetings, is I asked, this would have been 2 or 3 weeks ago, I asked Mayor Gunter and city manager to have a discussion with their council on what things the authority would need to do, or what they would need to see in order for them to feel comfortable rescinding their notice of intent to withdraw. And that was a topic of discussion, although they didn't have time as a council. They have not yet had a time as a council to have that discussion. And now with their July meeting recess, and then of course with the tragic news of Mayor Gunter, I don't know where we're going to go from there. And when Patrick and I resume our meetings with the city manager, that will be a topic that we talk about. One of the items that they wanted to address within this overall issue is a restructuring of the voting structure of the authority. And the city of Salinas were working on a revised proposal on how to change that voting structure. There's some of the initial information in the packet that we sent out to you guys that you can take a look at your leisure, but that is not a final version. And so we're waiting to hear back from them on how they would like to see the voting structure changed. But going back to the comments that Patrick made about the bond rating, we very much, there's many reasons, of course, why we need to have the city of Salinas rescind their notice. And one of them is the potential implications on the bond rating, plus just also the uncertainty. You look at the uncertainty from the employees' perspective. I mean, my gosh, they've been under this threat for a while, and how that would impact their jobs. That's not a good work environment. So we need to get that off the table.
Thank you, Rob.
So that's where we're at. Yeah, you're welcome, Andy. We're doing our best.
I know.
Right now, there's not a whole lot that we can say about that notice of intent to withdraw, other than we've made it very clear to the city of Salinas that we'd like to hear from them on what they would need to see in order for them to rescind it. And we're waiting to hear back on that. Any questions on that?
I don't think it's a question. I think what you basically said is we're waiting on the city to react, and I think the previous topic about Madison Lane, I think, is interconnected with the withdrawal order, and so yeah.
Yeah, it's all interconnected, isn't it? I mean, again, I go back to, there's so many moving parts to this, and today it's a good meeting to bring you guys up to speed on where we're at right now. And hopefully when we have our next meeting, we'll have some really substantive updates and be looking for some specific input, even more specific input from you guys. And hopefully our next meeting is a whole lot more of you guys talking than Patrick and myself talking. So are there any other issues related to what we've been talking about that you guys want to address in the last few minutes that we have here?
Yeah, the only question that I have, and sadly enough, the last conversation I had with Mayor Joe Gunther was last Wednesday, and it was around this issue, and he gave me some insight. But it's around the CEQA process. And Patrick, it's more connected to the previous topic, but you said some work was done a while back, and so how much of that work can be carried over to this new kind of proposal? And because I know how painful a CEQA process could be, and so as much as pain as we could, cut off, the better. If that makes sense.
And while Patrick answers that question, I am going to drop off here. I need to get logged on to my next board meeting. So thank you guys all for attending, and be safe, stay healthy, and I will talk to you all later.
Thanks, Rob. Patrick, you're on mute.
Yes, sorry. Yeah, Caesar, that I've still got scars on my back from past sequel processes going back 3 decades. So some of them haven't healed, even the old ones. So yeah, no, it can be painful. We've done some work. There was some work done on the last go round on CEQA, like traffic studies and some other things. COVID has obviously presented an interesting quandary for CEQA practitioners in the sense that things are a little different right now. Though I can just tell you by the traffic patterns, it seems like Salinas is almost back to normal. Because of the kinds of traffic I'm seeing now that I used to see before pre-COVID. So, there has been some work done. Some of the analytics for CEQA have been done. Obviously, we were revising the scope of work for how the CEQA would be finalized back in November of 2018, when we had the big hiccup with Republic buying the facility and the CEQA city issuing their notice. So we've got a head start, but the head start is really more the front end of CEQA, right? Like we've already got a well-written scope of work that just needs to be modified. We'll have to add in the roadway discussion since that wasn't in the last version. So I guess to answer your question is there is some work that's been done, but there's still a lot to do. And so we're looking at it being, basically a 1-year process.
Yeah, and then it's probably premature, but have you guys been coordinating any infrastructure improvements with the farm worker housing that's being built out there? Because I know that there was a condition of their approval process to kind of do some road improvements that better to have somebody else pay for road improvements than the authority, and how much of that, instead of doing it their way and then having to do it for us, how much coordination has been.
Well, that's actually a question. That work's already been sort of done for us. Both the mayor, John Phillips and Chris Lopez have all been in a lot of direct communication with the development group for that new farm worker housing facility. which is actually going to be right on the corner of the first leg of that Rossi extension. And so, they've worked with them on including that as a formal easement, dedicating it to the county. So the first leg of that roadway is actually already going to be dedicated. Now, whether they, they haven't really, I don't know if they've had any substantial discussions on funding, but dedication of the right of way for that roadway, that has been included in the arrangement. So the part that the county still needs to work on, and they weren't able to answer the question at our meeting yet, is how many other property owners do they have to work with to secure the rest of the right of ways. They weren't quite sure at the meeting. They were going to go back and work on that and get back to us, but there's going to be some additional work on the county's part to put together the rest of the easements on this, as well as working with the business community on some kind of a annual assessment or something, because there was some work done several years ago, and they indicated there was an interest by the business community in funding some of that road improvement. So that's work to come, but definitely something that's on the schedule.
And back on Sun Street, what does the appraisal value look like? And it's premature because they're talking about the whole marketplace project and everything, but just from what if we sell that property at the upper level, what we could probably get, does that kind of wash what the cost would be for a 007, or would it still be some money needing to be raised from, I'm assuming, credit or whatever.
Well, we have done a couple of appraisals in the past on the property. I can't tell you a dollar amount, just because that is subject to real property negotiations with the board. But I think your statement that the two properties are generally awash is pretty accurate, based on the size of the properties, the amount of commercial development on them, buildings, improvements. Generally speaking, we think, and we know ballpark, we have a ballpark idea about what we think Republic Services paid for it. So putting all that together on a per acre basis, I think the properties will probably be within less than $1 million of each other in total value.
Well, that's good. Yeah, because we're also going to save lease payments for your current office, right? You're leasing your property now for your office, for your office building. So
yeah, our plan
it's kind of drops in the bucket, but in the long term, it should help out. Okay, those are the only questions I had.
Great, well, thank you. Those are good questions. All right, does anybody else have any parting comments or questions? Anything you'd like to see come back? I think, again, our intent is, as we go forward with and begin substantial negotiations with all the parties at the table, we're going to be bringing some of this stuff back to the committee and actually getting your written or formal input on it to share with the board. They're going to want to, the board's going to want to know, what does the committee think? Are there things you think we should be focusing on that we're missing? Add-ons, edits, changes to the process. Hopefully at the next meeting, we will have the formal schedule. I have a draft that I prepared a couple of months ago. We called a Gantt chart, which sort of shows each of those different pieces and when they start, how long they're going to take, when they're going to complete, because we wanted to show the city how long this project actually takes. We've been saying it pretty consistently for about 10 years now. This is a 2-year project, and that assumes everything flows well. So from start to finish, we could be moving into that facility in 2 years. The problem is I don't have a start date, and the start date is when I have political assurance, or the board feels comfortable that the involved parties are all at the table and committed. And I think when that happens, Mandy's done a lot of work. She's working on the consultant with the scope of work and the contractors to start CEQA. I'm working on the real property side. We've got appraisers lined up. We've got structural engineers lined up. we basically have everything we need to start the project at the starting line. I just need someone to give me the green flag and say, get going. And we're ready to rock and roll on this. So hopefully by the next meeting, we'll be able to share that schedule with you, because it will have been vetted by the 4 parties, and we will have gotten some fine tuning on the dates and timelines.
So Patrick, in regards to the rescind, common sense would tell me that it'd be simple to get them to rescind their withdrawal notice. Is that what we're expecting?
Well, that's what we're hoping. I mean, I'll be honest, and I don't like to mince words on this thing. This doesn't make any sense to me for the city to even keep doing this, other than it's some leverage, and it's simply because the financial impact to the city of doing this is significant. I mean, they take on a huge liability that goes on their books.
I agree with you. I mean, none of this has made sense to me from the beginning, but I mean,
well,
just
I know what they wanted. I mean, they want us to relocate Sun Street. The problem is they haven't been able to come to agreement on where. We've had agreements that have been changed with minds changed later on. I'm not going to harp on the past. That our condition right now is simply they have to be pot committed, and I think they are. We've had some very good discussions with the city manager and the mayor, God rest his soul, that indicate that the city is committed to this and they want to support it. So we got the city. The counties has expressed their commitment politically and at the staff level. We just need to hear right now. We need to hear from Republic, which we haven't heard enough to know exactly where they're at. And the city needs to help facilitate that partnership between us and Republic, and we can make this happen. And so once the city changes their position, we think that they're supporting this right now. They've made that very clear. We just need to, the board needs to be politically comfortable that the city is going to commit. And then we're ready to start spending the money and moving the project forward.
Thank you.
All right. Any follow-up? Any last comments, words of wisdom, advice?
Patrick, I just wanted a point of clarification on the agenda for number 5. Erica, I don't know if you saw, but the recommendation was to establish a regular meeting schedule.
Yeah, I just saw that. Sorry about
Okay.
that.
Okay, so that's not what the recommendation
No,
was.
that is not.
That was
Okay.
from last agenda. Yeah, that was
Okay, gotcha.
our meeting schedule.
Well, I as a proofreader did not catch that until right now, so I
wasn't going to
apologize.
say anything, Mandy.
I just want to make sure we weren't supposed to make some meeting schedule, but that's it. Thank you.
All right, everybody. Well, I'm anticipating our next meeting will be probably in 2 months, just because of the dead month where we're both the city and the county and the authority are on summer recess for a month. And hopefully we'll have some progress between now and then. We'll actually have some substantial stuff for you guys to begin providing your opinions and input on, so we can share that with all the stakeholders and the board. So we'll keep you informed as we go along. And as always, my door is always open. You have my phone number, you have Mandy's, you have Rob's. You guys need to contact us. You have questions, you want more information, please don't hesitate to reach out. We'll be more than happy to provide you anything you need.
Sounds great. Thank you, Patrick.
Thanks,
All right.
Patrick.
Cool,
By
thank
the way,
you.
my son says hi.
Thank you.
With that, we'll adjourn, and thank you very much. Everybody stay safe.
Thank you for your time, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Oh,
Bye.
there
Bye,
you
take
go.
care.
Way to go.
Oh,
There he is.
there he is. Hi, buddy.
She's
The baby
so
crab.
cute.
Here comes the sister. Yeah.
Next one.
Woohoo.
And we love
Super
solid
cute.
waste authority.
Woohoo.
I have to get him
Super
my
cute.
t-shirt.
Have a great night,
Awesome.
guys.
Thank
Thanks,
you. You too.
Bye.
Bye.